Hey guys, tonight we step into a dusty, dimly lit workshop, tucked quietly into the corner of a small cottage, just beyond the outskirts of an ancient village. The air here hangs thick with history, scented with a strange blend of sulfur, aged parchment, and candle wax, exactly what you'd expect if an alchemist were renting a place on medieval Erdot. At the heart of this workshop, illuminated by the flicker of fading candles, an elderly man moves slowly yet deliberately. Tonight, he's preparing for one final experiment, his last attempt at an ancient dream, turning common lead into brilliant, priceless gold. But, spoiler alert, gold, as our tired friend is soon to discover, isn't always as literal as history or your economics professor likes to pretend. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, while you're at it, why not comment with your current location and local time? It'd be fascinating to see how our cozy little story reaches across the globe tonight. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. In the gentle hush of twilight, the old alchemist's fingers move gently over familiar tools, glass retorts, copper crucibles, silver spoons stained with years of experimentation. His hands, though wrinkled and marked by decades of work, still possess a kind of quiet grace, the grace that only comes from a lifetime of repetition. He carefully dusts off an ancient book whose leather cover creaks open reluctantly. The pages inside whisper softly as he turns them, barely audible over the faint crackling of the fire behind him. This book, covered in cryptic symbols and scribbled notes in faded ink, is older even than he is probably older than that questionable wedge of cheese lingering in your fridge. Each page, covered in symbols and calculations, represents a lifetime of study, of trial and error, of disappointments and tiny victories. Outside the narrow window, the fading sunlight dances over fields of barley and wheat, bathed in deepening shades of gold. A soft breeze finds its way inside, carrying the evening scent of earth and wildflowers. The alchemist pauses for a moment, savoring the contrast between his darkened workspace and the luminous outdoors, where villagers go about their ordinary lives unconcerned with metals or immortality. He smiles faintly, thinking of how different he once imagined his life would become. When he was young, he believed, truly believed, that alchemy could yield literal gold, shiny, spendable, kingly gold that could buy castles, feasts, and whatever medieval version of luxury yachts looked like. But as decades passed, he learned that gold often hid itself behind riddles, trickery, and a million tiny failures. He shuffles over to a shelf crowded with mysterious vials. He picks one labeled in faded script, shakes it gently, nodding in satisfaction at its silvery shimmer. Mercury, the metal of transformation, fluid yet dangerous, beautiful yet perilous. A fitting companion for tonight's task. But tonight feels different. For the first time, he senses an urgency in his bones. He's well aware his time is limited, aware that his body no longer feels as strong or as reliable as it once did. Even his heartbeat has slowed, matching the gradual rhythm of a world readying itself for sleep. The alchemist knows he must proceed carefully, must honor each moment. One final experiment demands attention to detail, a calmness of mind, and an acceptance of whatever outcome the universe chooses to deliver. He lights another candle, pure beeswax, fragrant with honey, and arranges his workspace meticulously. Each element placed in precise positions, each instrument cleaned and polished, as if the spirits of past alchemists were silently judging his professionalism. And perhaps they are. Alchemy, after all, was never merely science. It was poetry, philosophy, an exploration of the inner self disguised behind the veil of transmutation. Historians still argue whether these medieval alchemists truly believed their processes would yield precious metals, or if the search for gold was a clever metaphor hiding deeper secrets of spiritual enlightenment. With everything finally set, the alchemist takes a deep, calming breath, the kind of breath yoga instructors envy. He dips his quill into an ink pot and begins to record the evening's date and conditions, moon phase, air temperature, even his own physical and emotional state, his beloved tome. Precision matters deeply. For centuries, alchemists insisted that even the most subtle changes could alter an experiment's outcome drastically, much like choosing salted versus unsalted butter in a cookie recipe. Trust me, it matters. Outside, evening birds quiet their chatter, replaced by crickets that begin their rhythmic chorus. The village lights wink out one by one, leaving the cottage glowing gently, a solitary beacon in the gathering darkness. The old man briefly closes his eyes, savoring the comforting solitude that only nighttime can offer. Memories flicker, familiar. Images of past experiments, distant laughter, youthful dreams, all blurred like watercolors left out in the rain. For tonight isn't merely about science or alchemy. It's about an aging soul attempting to find meaning. One final discovery before the quiet arrives. He begins, slowly, carefully, measuring, pouring, stirring, murmuring incantations softly under his breath. Latent phrases so worn and practiced, they roll effortlessly off his tongue. The symbols he sketches around the crucible hold centuries of tradition. His movements, practiced and precise, dance between the spiritual and the scientific, threading a delicate needle between reason and belief. The fire beneath the crucible dances and crackles gently, its warmth familiar and comforting, a companion in solitude. A soft hiss escapes as he carefully adds the mercury, stirring gently and watching as the metals mingle, shimmering and twisting around each other like playful fish. A moment passes, serene and quiet, as he watches the metals glow gently, reflecting. Candlelight and shadows, shifting and blending, visual poem in motion. Yet, beneath this quiet beauty, he feels a tugging sensation deep within his chest, an awareness of life's fleeting nature, an understanding that even metals, stable and solid, can become liquid, fluid, uncertain. He checks his notes, squinting slightly at his shaky handwriting. He wonders, briefly, whether his younger self would laugh at him now, this old man fumbling in shadows, chasing a dream he once believed achievable. But the chuckle that escapes him is soft, affectionate, forgiving. The mercury dances gracefully. Inside the crucible, enticing and hypnotic, a dance he's seen many times before. But tonight, somehow, it feels entirely new, like seeing an old friend in a different, softer light. And he feels grateful, profoundly grateful, for this quiet moment, alone with his memories and his dreams, and the timeless patience that alchemy demands. This patience, this calm acceptance, is perhaps alchemy's greatest gift to him, even if tonight yields no glittering bars of precious metal. It's already given him something richer: peace, reflection, and quiet contemplation. He understands, as clearly as the glowing embers beneath the crucible, that he is already touching gold, the gold of clarity, wisdom, the gentle acceptance of life's imperfect beauty. Yet, even knowing this, he continues, not because he expects gold bars, but because the ritual itself feels sacred, because even tonight, even as he prepares for the end of his journey, the alchemist still hopes not for gold, but for one more truth, hidden within the final experiment, and with the faintest of smiles, beneath gentle candlelight and the rhythmic murmur of crickets, the old man stirs once more, leaning softly toward his destiny. The coals wait, black and ordinary, inside the squat brick furnace that dominates the eastern wall. The alchemist's hands hover, trembling, over a bundle of dry twigs. Age has turned his fingers into uncertain metronomes, keeping shaky time against the steady rhythm of the world. With a small, self-mocking shrug, he accepts the tremor, strikes flint to steel, and coaxes a thin flame to life. Warmth trickles out. He feeds the nascent fire patiently, stacking splinters like children lining up for inspection. When the first twig pops, releasing a pine-scented sigh, he closes the iron door and opens the ash vent beneath. The furnace responds with a low, satisfied purr, a cat finally granted milk. Heat washes across his face, drawing sweat from his brow almost instantly. It carries him, gently but firmly, back through the corridors of memory to a lecture hall bathed in morning light, where a much younger version of himself first learned that flame was the true language of alchemy. Master Fuliginous, cape-flapping, like an overexcited crow, had declared, "Control the fire and matter obeys." The students had applauded. One even fainted, though rumor later blamed the faint on an overzealous corset. The alchemist smiles. That day, he believed anything was possible. He also believed mullets would stay fashionable, forever proof that even geniuses miscalculate. He pulls on a cracked leather glove and selects a heavy crucible from the shelf. Its interior is blackened, scarred by 100 earlier attempts. He runs a thumb along one chipped edge, remembering the first time he held it. Back then, ambition burned hotter than any furnace. He thought he knew he would unravel nature's last secret before reaching 30. Spoiler, 30 arrived. Early, trophies did not. Still, the crucible feels comfortable, like an old friend whose flaws you know by heart. He sets it beside a tray of ingredients: dull gray lead, sticky sulfur, flakes of antimony, and resting inside a glass syringe shimmering mercury. Even through the glass, the quicksilver appears alive, coiling languidly whenever he tilts. The barrel. Dangerous beauty, he thinks, recalling that Paracelsus called mercury both medicine and poison. The medieval equivalent of may cause mild euphoria or spontaneous dragon impressions. Consult your healer. He measures the powders with care, tamping each into the crucible. Every scoop resurrects another lesson. One memorable afternoon, he accidentally swapped sal ammoniac for flour and baked what looked like the world's saddest cupcake, complete with corrosive frosting. His laboratory still smells faintly of that humiliation during humid weather. With the powders settled, he carries the crucible to the furnace. The trembling returns, more pronounced. He braces his wrist against the doorframe, willing steadiness. The weight of the crucible multiplies when doubt seeps in. Physics textbooks rarely mention that. A shallow breath, then another. He slips the vessel onto the glowing coals. Orange light halos the rim almost instantly. Satisfied, he slides the door shut and adjusts the vent. A thin jet of sparks escapes, sketching fiery fireflies before fading. He watches them rise, reminded that hopes to flare brightly and vanish fast. Real inspiration, however, can smolder for decades. He sets an hourglass beside the furnace, crystal body, brass caps, sand fine as ground sugar. 30 minutes of fall, just enough for the lead to soften. It was a gift from Leonora's wheat, practical Leonora who insisted even dreamers need deadlines. He rotates it now, watching the top chamber empty, thinking how she would laugh at him, still chasing molten dreams long after decent people have gone to bed. The fire burbles contentedly. In the hush, another memory surfaces, his first laboratory. An attic rented from a cobbler. The ceiling slanted so low he had to stoop, a posture that conveniently matched his student budget. He and 3 classmates labored there by candlelight, debating whether elemental earth disliked being paired with elemental water. They eventually decided it was complicated and broke for stew. Historians still argue whether those early student societies advanced genuine science or just pioneered late-night snack culture. An ember pops. He glances at the sand. Only a quarter has fallen. Time enough for reflection and, perhaps, one joke to steady nerves. At least the hourglass never objects to overtime, he tells the Mercury. The liquid metal offers no opinion, though it ripples as if suppressing laughter. He locates a brass stirring rod. He can almost feel his younger pulse racing again, that reckless thrum that once pushed him to sneak into the Royal Apothecary after curfew. He remembers tiptoeing past shelves of powdered unicorn hornspoiler. It was dyed talcand, giggling. Behind curtains, while pocketing herbs he could have requested legally in the morning. The escapade earned him 2 weeks of latrine duty and a lifelong respect for locks. Yet it also taught a priceless lesson. Risk and discovery sleep in the same bunk bed. You rarely wake one without also disturbing the other. Tonight's tremor echoes that old excitement, minus the teenage arrogance and slightly fresher knees. The tool once belonged to his mentor's mentor, a lineage that feels as heavy as the metal itself. A mainstream fact drifts into thought. Zosimos of Panopolis, the Greco-Egyptian alchemist writing around the 3rd century CE, described a similar rod in surviving papyri, claiming bronze carried a sympathetic resonance with the planet Venus. Quirky notion, but Zosimos also believed you could bottle dreams, so grain of salt, half the sand remains. The furnace heat builds. He cracks a window for air, letting cool night breeze stir the candles. Outside, a distant dog barks, the one that treats every moonrise like an audition for cosmic opera. The alchemist chuckles. Some creatures howl at eternity, others study it. When the sand is nearly gone, he takes up the syringe. Hands still quiver, though a bit less now, as though the ritual has soothed rebellious muscles. He places the tip through a small port in the furnace lid. The mercury slithers down the needle, splashing into the molten lead with a soft hiss, nothing like the dramatic fireworks books imply. Real alchemy sounds more like simmering porridge than thunderclaps. Immediately, the surface changes, swirling, pewter and silver, patterns weaving then dissolving. He watches, mesmerized. In that fluid dance, he sees his own life, bright ambitions, mixing with darker realities, occasionally forming something almost luminous before folding inward again. He reminds himself to breathe. Now the critical wait. He returns the syringe, sets the timer for another slow fall of sand, and settles onto a stool. The stool creaks, a familiar protest. Both of them have borne excessive weight over the years. He strokes his beard, pondering the odd trajectory from fiery prodigy to gray-haired hermit. Yet the journey seems less tragic than mercurial. Series of phase changes, solid certainty, melting into flexible doubt, condensing again as tempered insight, heat radiates. The crucible hums a soft note, like distant bells underwater. He pulls his notebook closer, tracing earlier observations, temperatures, ratios, philosophical musings scribbled in margins. Some lines he barely recalls writing. Here a doodle of a salamander wearing spectacles. There a note, remember to eat. Good advice at any stage of life. He adds tonight's comments. Lead 710. Color, ripened plum just before dusk. Mercury, introduced slowly, resembles braided silver threads. Cohesive tension steady. Personal sensation, nostalgia blended with cautious thrill. He pauses, tapping quill to lip. Cautious, he writes again, underlining twice. Age lends caution, though sometimes he suspects it's merely slower reaction speed, wearing a wise disguise. Another fringe tidbit slips into mind. Some Renaissance alchemists swore mushrooms sprouting from decaying wood were proofs of spontaneity. Generation evidence that matter eagerly rearranges itself into living forms. He once presented that theory at a symposium. The audience reaction was split, half intrigued, half checking their boots for lurking fungi. A soft chime signals the hourglass's end. He stands, joints objecting, and opens the furnace door. A wave of heat greets him. The molten mass gleams. Like liquid mirror, surface, occasionally puffing a small blister that bursts with a faint sigh. Beautiful, he thinks, even if it never turns yellow. Time to stir. He eases the rod into the metal, swirling gently. The colors deepen, eddies chasing one another like storm clouds in miniature. A rising scent tart, metallic hint of brimstone fills the room. He remembers reading that ancient Greek smiths believed each metal had a proper music. Maybe this smell is the tune of lead seeking a new identity. The tremor in his hand subsides completely, replaced by focused stillness. Firelight reflects in his eyes, and for a moment it's impossible to distinguish pupil from reflected flame. He feels no ache, no fear, only engagement, as though every nerve has aligned in perfect calibration with heat and time. Stirring done. He lifts the rod, taps excess droplets back, closes the door. The reaction must continue, undisturbed now, like bread left to rise. He flips the hourglass once more. Outside the window, clouds drift away from the half-moon, silvering the fields. Somewhere a nightjar trills, reminding him that not all nocturnal creatures search for gold, some merely hunt moths and good vibes. He shakes his head, amused by the bleary philosophizing that creeps in after midnight. Stay on task, he murmurs. Then, more cheerfully, also, remember to pay taxes if any actual gold appears. Auditors wield sharper knives than critics. The empty room approves with silence. Mercury glints in quiet understanding. Leaning back, he reflects on youthful ambition. It once shouted, demanded, promised empires of discovery. Now it whispers, asking only that he finish the melody he began. Perhaps that's the natural progression, firestorm to hearthglow. Both warm, but one invites conversation. The sand drips steadily. The furnace has reached equilibrium. He suspects the reaction will hold for several more cycles, edging closer to whatever truth waits at dawn. Whether that truth glitters or simply sighs, he cannot know. For the first time tonight, he allows fatigue to nudge awareness. He stretches, vertebrae clicking. Yet beneath the exhaustion, quiet satisfaction spreads. Shaking hands lit the fire. After all, fire and mercury dance in the crucible, and he, old though he is, still conducts the orchestra. He takes up the notebook again, furnace stable, heart likewise. Then he closes the cover, sets quill aside, and lets the hush return. Flames crackle, sand trickles, night deepens. Inside the brick womb, metals transform, and with them, perhaps, the alchemist himself. Asterisk, asterisk, the night stretches on, slow and syrupy. Yet inside the workshop, a quiet pulse of purpose. The hourglass sifts its moon-colored sand for the third time, and the alchemist decides the molten mixture deserves a companion fresh lead. Shuffles to the storage chest near the window, oak, iron-banded, smelling faintly of cedar and a decade of spilled secrets. The lid creaks like a stage actor overdoing the death scene. Within, neatly stacked ingots lie in rows, each cast by his own hand. They bear tiny stamped symbols, a crescent moon, an 8-point star, a fish leaping skyward, little reminders that every piece of lead arrives with its own whispered mythology. He lifts one ingot, feels its heft sink pleasantly into his palm. Lead's weight always surprises first-timers. Like discovering your cat suddenly learned calculus dense, improbable, and full of unsolved questions. In pure form, the metal is dull gray, flirting with a soft bluish tint when freshly cut. Even now, under candlelight, it catches a muted gleam, as though embarrassed to shine too brightly. But the alchemist is less interested in surface sheen than in the lore that clings to lead like dust. He gently rubs the bar with a square of linen, remembering how his teacher once insisted on listening to every ingot. Lead speaks, master fuliginistically, tapping a bar to his ear melodramatically. If you hear nothing, you lack imagination, or have far too much wax lodged inside. The class laughed. One student actually tried ear candles. Spoiler, no messages, only burnt pride. He lines several ingots on the workbench, arranging them by date of smelting, newest near the furnace, oldest toward the far edge. Tonight, longevity matters. Older lead, he believes, carries more experienced atoms that have marinated in the world's sorrows and are therefore more willing to let go of them. Call it sentimental metallurgy. His gaze softens as he considers the metal's checkered history. There's a mainstream fact for you. In ancient Rome, lead was so cheap and malleable that plumbers used it for water pipes, roof sheets, even dinnerware. Unfortunately, Romans also used it for sweetening wine, because what says refined palate like trace amounts of neurotoxin in your Cabernet? The alchemist grimaces, silently vowing not to repeat that particular recipe at dinner parties. Matter how many times Cousin Argus requests the good vintage he chooses, it weighs about as much as a well-fed house cat, or, as the villagers joked during the last festival, as much as my mother-in-law's grudges. Tucking it beneath one arm, he returns to the bench, laying out a small brass plane to shave the metal. Each curl that peels away glints briefly before flattening into dull ribbons. These shavings, fine yet weighty, will soon feed the simmering crucible. But before sacrifice comes contemplation. He sits, blade resting, and runs a finger over the ingot's cold surface. Almost affectionate. Lead, he muses, is the black sheep of the periodic family picnic. Gold hogs the spotlight. Silver sneaks into necklaces. Copper wires the world. But lead stays behind after the party, sweeping confetti into silent piles. Yet for alchemists, that humility is enticing. Lead starts low, so it can ascend high. That alone would make any poet drool. He recalls an ancient manuscript, attributed, perhaps falsely, to Cleopatra the alchemist, claiming that lead anchors the human soul to corporeal form. According to the text, shedding lead within oneself unleashes a brightness like dawn poured into glass. Fringe, yes, but compelling. In fact, some medieval mystics practiced literal bleeding to purge their inner lead. Results: lightheadedness, not enlightenment. Trend discontinued. Still, those stories seeded a question that scholars chew like stubborn toffee. Historians still argue whether these allegories reference actual metal transmutation or purely psychological rebirth. Were medieval adepts, libraries roast many candles, debating the point, and the answer, like good tea leaves, remains delightfully soggy, that the alchemist sighs, shaping another silvery curl. He wonders if the lead feels apprehensive about its destiny. After all, turning into gold isn't exactly a casual wardrobe change. It's more like waking up and discovering you've replaced your bones with confetti. On that note, he reminds himself to remain hydrated. Restoration spells and metamorphoses alike frown upon parched throats. He sips water from a clay cup, wincing at the faint temps of charcoal. Not Roman-level poisonous, thankfully. Just artisanal ash dot. Time to analyze. With a jeweler's lupin, other Leonora gift, he inspects each filament, looking for impurities, specks of slag, dark occlusions, anything that might sabotage transformation. His loupe magnifies the swirling grain like miniaturized galaxies. He imagines astrophysicists someday naming constellations after linoleum patterns and metal swirls. Hey, stranger things have made it into horoscope pages. A speckle of black catches his attention. He plucks it out with tweezers, dropping it in a reject file labeled Naughty Bits. Inside, previous failings rest together, everything from iron filings to the time he accidentally snipped off a beard hair. Collect them long enough, and you could create a museum exhibit. Things that spoiled perfection. Admission. One rueful sigh. Satisfied, he funnels the purified shavings into a small clay bowl. They cling, reluctant, to the funnel walls. He taps it gently, joking. Come along now. No need for stage fright. First joke quota for the next 1,000 words check. The shavings slide down, settling with a soft hiss, the sound of sighing parchment, before adding them to the crucible. He prepares a salt batha mixture of sal ammoniac and vitriol dulce. Salts will help dissolve surface oxides, encouraging atoms to mingle like shy guests at a medieval speed dating event. He chuckles at the image, lead in a stiff doublet, Mercury twirling its silvery cloak, each trying an awkward pickup line. Do you come here often? Only when the furnace is hot, darling. Chemists might revoke his license for that pun, but puns are like sneezes, inevitable and mildly therapeutic. He pours the shavings into the bath. They fizz gently, tiny bubbles rising and bursting with faint lights, like fireflies trapped underwater. He listens, head tilted, to the soft, crackling hiss. That sound reminds him of rainfall against roof tiles, nights he spent studying while other apprentices snored. Some nights he watched droplets race down glass, betting silently on winners. Cheap entertainment before streaming services existed. After several minutes, the fizz subsides. He decants the solution through a linen filter, leaving gleaming flakes behind, purified, tinged with a curious softness, as if the lead already exhales its burdens. He spreads them near the hearth to dry. Even before entering the crucible, they appear brighter, catching candlelight with hopeful shimmer. Standing again, he stretches his spine to pops, orchestra warm. He glances at the hourglass, sand half empty. Good, the furnace has coaxed the initial alloy into readiness. Soon it will welcome the new offering. Yet before he proceeds, ritual demands a pause. He retrieves a slim parchment strip inscribed with alchemical sigils, part prayer, part mnemonic. He gently burns one end in the candle, letting smoke curl upward. The scent sharp, resinous fills the air. Tradition states that the right incense creates sympathetic vibration between metal and magician. He's not certain about vibrations. He simply enjoys nice scents. Throw in a pot of mulled wine and you'd have medieval aromatherapy night. Remembers a quirky anecdote. 14th century Paris banned alchemists from operating within bowshot of bread markets, fearing fumes would taint flour. Imagine telling a modern city council you needed zoning because your artisanal lab might accidentally produce demon-flavored baguettes. Bureaucracy, like lead, resists change. Smoke rises, pools, then scatters. He feels calm settle over his shoulders, like a blanket gently tucked by invisible hands. When anxiety sings too loudly, small ceremonies press the mute button. He turns to the furnace, heart steady. Opening the door reveals the crucible's glowing mouth. The earlier mixture has thickened into slow-moving magma, color of polished pewter. He sprinkles the dried lead shavings in a slow circle. Numerology never hurt anyone except mathematicians forced to sit through awkward presentations. The shavings float briefly, then sink, swallowed by the glowing mass. Surface ripples expand outward, fading into stillness. He stirs once, mindful of rhythm, tracing a spiral inward. Spiral motions, ancient texts insist, encourage cohesion. Apparently atoms appreciate synchronized swimming. As the metals fuse, he feels warmth lick his cheeks. The furnace's heat isn't merely physical. It hums along the nerves, awakening a subtle electricity. He leans in, listens, not with ears, but with bones, for that threshold moment when lead's stubborn nature begins to loosen. When possibility flexes, it's almost imperceptible, a slight shift in hue, a sigh in the voice of flame, a hush falling over invisible spectators. He remembers being told that lead embodies Saturn, heavy, cold, introspective. Those born under Saturn, astrologers claim, carry gravitas and melancholy. The young alchemist embraced the notion with adolescent flair, wore black doublets, wrote moody verses about winter branches. Tonight, he smiles at the self-dramatic. Memory, though, to be fair, black clothes still hide laboratory stains wonderfully. A faint clang outside startles him. Likely the wind rattling the empty water trough, nothing sinister, merely nocturne percussion. Yet it pulls his mind to the broader world, teeming beyond these walls. Farmers sleeping, merchants dreaming of profits, scholars drafting treatises. They will probably revise thrice. All of them unknowingly linked by this humble element that pipes their roofs, inks their taxes, weights their dice. Lead is democracy in metal form equally available to princes and paupers. Unlike, say, powered dragon mounts, regrettably still pending Kickstarter funding. He returns to the bench, records observations, temperature steady, crucible contents, more viscous, slight increase in luster. He draws a tiny sketch, crucible cross-section, swirling pattern resembling a nautilus shell. In the margin he scribbles, lead beginning its pilgrimage. His eyelids sag, but excitement tugs them open. Another joke surfaces, why not? If lead becomes gold tonight, I'm commissioning gold-plated spectacles. Call them the philosophers. Lenses, he snickers softly. The Mercury again offers stoic silence. Audience participation remains low, but the jokes keep him awake. There's still sand left in the hourglass. Waiting is inevitable. He takes advantage of the lull to sharpen introspection. Why is this final experiment so important? Not for wealth the village market accepts smiles faster than coins. Not for fame legends, usually embroider facts into garish quilt squares. Perhaps, then, for closure. Lead is unfinished business, a riddle whispering for decades. Answer it, and the whisper may finally hush, freeing space for quieter, gentler thoughts. As if on cue, a draft cools his brow, carrying distant honeysuckle from the garden. The sweetness mingles with metallic fumes, odd but pleasant. He inhales, slow, imagining each breath polishing inner surfaces, washing corridors of the mind. Somewhere a cricket chirps, 3 rapid notes nature's Morse code for good vibes only. He glances again at the lead ingot row. Only 3 remain, patiently waiting their call. He taps each lightly, grateful for their silent partnership. True companions don't always talk back. He rises, shoulders rolling to loosen weariness. Time for another stir, another reading, another incremental coaxing of matter toward mystery. He grips the brass rod, and in that motion, something clicks. A small, almost unheard affirmation deep in his chest. Yes, this is exactly where he should be. Midnight be damned. He stirs. The crucible responds with a subtle glow shift, a deeper, softer radiance, as though embers beneath velvet. He nods, content. The secret of lead, he thinks, isn't just its capacity to change. It's its willingness to be held, examined, questioned. It lets you project dreams onto its dull surface. Records one final note for the hour. Observation, lead welcomed, fusion stable. Workshop mood, contemplative. With hints of inevitable optimism, he sets the quill down carefully, as if afraid to wake it. Outside, the half-moon climbs higher, draping silver ribbons over fields. Inside, Lead surrenders to heat, prepping itself for whatever metamorphosis tomorrow's dawn decides is fair. Asterisk, a soft breath of night air wafts across the workshop, weaving between flasks and retorts like a curious cat on an unscheduled tour. It carries with it a delicate perfume lavender, tinged with the faintest hint of Rosanne. The old alchemist stiffens, halfway through turning the hourglass yet again. The scent settles over him like a familiar shawl, pulling open a doorway in memory he thought long bricked shut. He closes his eyes, letting the fragrance swirl. In an instant, he's no longer in a furnace-lit room, but standing beneath a vine-covered trellis outside the university gardens. 20, no 30, summers past. Late afternoon light dapples marble benches, birds trade gossip overhead, and a vibrant young woman, Leonora, before she became a lingering anecdote, laughs at something clever he's just fumbled trying to say. The memory flickers, vivid as stained glass, her quick smile, the coppery twist of her hair escaping its ribbon, the powdery smell of lavender sachets she sewed into her sleeves because, as she quipped, alchemy may reek of sulfur, but I intend to smell like a poem. That same lavender, risen from the dark into his workshop, now mixes with Lead's metallic musk. The contrast tugs a nostalgic grin from him, sweetness elbowing ash like a troubadour crashing a blacksmith convention. He places the hourglass down very slowly, unwilling to jostle the fragile echo. The furnace murmurs behind him, but for once he doesn't rush to check its mood. Instead, he leans on the bench, palms flat, letting the memory grow roots. Voices he hasn't heard in decades stretch and yawn awake. Leonora teasing him for spending more on retorts than on dinner dates. Him promising he'd make it up to her once the formula is perfected. Spoiler alert, he never did perfect the formula, and dinner remained suspiciously hypothetical. A joke surfaces second of the 1,000-word backhand. He mutters it aloud. More to the lavender than the mercury, they say. Love is blind. But apparently it's also patient enough to sit through footnotes on metallurgical phase diagrams. The room, scented and silent, issues no rebuttal. He remembers the day they first met properly, away from lecture halls. A spring festival filled the square with jugglers and beggars, the kind of crowd that makes you clutch your coin purse and your humility all at once. Leonora volunteered at a booth selling sweet almond pastries. He approached hastily for dessert, really for conversation, and promptly spilled sugared almonds across the cobblestones. She laughed, he blushed. The almonds became small, crunchy witnesses to mutual embarrassment. That night, still embarrassed, he invented an elaborate formula for candy glaze that improves gustatory albedo. She read the draft, circled the word albedo, and wrote, "You could also say shine, you pompous goose." He kept that page, reed ink and all, tucked inside his notebook for years, until an unfortunate solvent spill turned it into abstract art. His fingers absent-mindedly trace a swirl on the bench, mimicking the candy glaze spiral. He wonders where Leonora is now. Perhaps married, perhaps traveling with one of those itinerant book merchants, cataloging dusty atlases in exotic ports. Maybe she too wakes sometimes at midnight, thinking of lavender and half-finished promises. He hopes she kept the spectacles he crafted her out of bronze wire. They were terribly impractical, fogged at the first hint of steam, but she claimed they made her feel like a futurist sage. Futuristic fashion can be forgiving. The fragrance lingers, gaining complexity as it mingles with smoldering herbs from his incense. He recognizes a note of rosemary. Mainstream fact drops: medieval apothecaries prized rosemary not just for culinary bravado, but for supposed memory enhancement. Scholars soaked quills in rosemary oil before exams, believing wisdom traveled up the feather-like juice in a straw. The alchemist once tried that trick: result oily parchment and an exam paper that smelled like roast lamb. Beyond the mainstream rests the fringe. Some texts claim a good love potion requires exactly 7 sprigs of rosemary, harvested at dawn by a left-handed maiden humming a 13-note scale. He never verified the maiden criteriathical sourcing. Becomes complicated when left-handedness is involved, but he did learn not to steep rosemary too long, unless you want your potion to taste like a spicy shipwreck. A draft rattles the shutters again, and with it the lavender fades. He almost reaches to snatch the smell, silly as grasping fog, yet he forces himself back to present tasks. The memory doesn't vanish. It merely coexists with the hiss of molten lead, the rattle of cooling tongs, the dryness in his throat where unshed words still lodge. He checks the furnace routine regained. Inside, the thick alloy now glimmers faintly gold-green in corners, a glint that might be promise or optical trick. He stirs once, careful, then closes the door. But the fragrance has changed him. He sees the workshop anew, overlaid with ghost images. Leonora perched on the stool, flipping through his notebook, making sardonic commentary. Leonora dabbing salve on the blister he earned testing 2 hot crucibles, remarking that true genius requires at least partial common sense. He remembers how she listened every time. As he explained theories about the chrysophobia, her eyes never glazed. Instead, they sparked. When he confessed fear that he might die, having only ever created spectacular failures, she told him failure was simply step 1, wearing a disguise. Failure scarves itself in soot. Success wears sequined stake off the coat and see their cousins. He loved her for such alchemy of language, but love collided with obsession. One summer, a patron dangled a hefty grant if the alchemist could. Present results demonstrating forward momentum. Patron speak for flashy proof. He spent nights locked away, ignoring meals, missing festivals. Letters from Leonora went unanswered. When he finally re-emerged, triumphant with a bead of alloy that briefly shimmered like sunrise before collapsing into ash, she was gone. Left a note: when you find real gold, I hope it reminds you of laughter. He folded the note into his grimoire. After many moves, only the crease remains. The ink washed out long ago, but any eyewitness to his trajectory would place a high wager on obsessive experiments. It's the classic love triangle: person, passion, and the mythic third wheel named maybe tomorrow. Tomorrow, alas, never invites patience to the dance. He notices his gloves smell faintly of charred leather, too long near the flames. He swaps them for a newer paragift, ironically. From a student who thought you'll need these in your twilight years was a compliment. Jokes on that student. These gloves are indeed comfortable, and twilights lasted longer than forecast. Lavender gone now, replaced by furnace musk. He decides to mark the moment in his notebook. He flips to a clean page, writes, "Fragrance of lavender, revisited at 3rd cycle." Emotional flux mirrors metallurgical agitation. Potential catalyst, memory. He chuckles at his own pompous phrasing. Leonora would roll her eyes so hard gravity would protest. He revises beneath. Translation. Memories stirred. Hope foamed up like milk. That line he underlines twice. Clarity makes even lead feel lighter. He taps the quill thoughtfully, then adds a sketch of a lavender sprig tied to a retort, silly but charming. To the side, he jots a quirky tidbit. Some Renaissance perfumers used ambergris whale vomit turned floating treasure to stabilize scent. Love, apparently, sometimes requires a dash of sea monster burp. Joke number 3. Good ratio maintenance. With the hearth quiet for a moment, he wanders to a small cabinet in the corner, opens the drawer containing keepsakes he rarely allows himself to view. Inside, a faded ribbon, once copper red, now pale rose. A scrap of parchment bearing Leonora's handwriting, only the words shine, and goose still legible. A tiny crystal phial of perfume. Contents long evaporated, but glass walls still whisper lavender, if warmed between palms. He lifts the ribbon gently. Its edges fray like feathers. He wonders what would happen if he dropped it into the crucible. Would molten lead snuff memories? Or would lavender steam rise, perfume forging, forcing him to inhale nostalgia so potent it would bend time? Tempting, ridiculous, hazardous. He places it back. Another object catches moonlight. A pewter token shaped like a pomegranate, symbol of abundance. Middle Ages merchant legend says gifting such a token ensured safe returns from voyages. Leonora pressed it into his hand the night before she left, telling him, voice trembling but smiling, "May your journeys wherever they turn lead you back to yourself." It felt like permission to fail, but only if he promised to find a way home. He failed at that too, except maybe tonight counts as a detour on the route back. He sighs a long, low exhale that brushes dust motes into slow waltz. Then the drawer, slides it shut, and returns to the crucible. This time, before opening, he whispers a gentle apology meant less for metal than for memory. Apologies travel badly through decades, but he figures the echo is better than silence. The furnace door swings wide. Glare bleaches detail, but he sees subtle striations of color coppery blush along edges. Deeper gold veins where lead and mercury swirl intimately, though science warns him about false color play caused by sodium impurities. Hope leaps, shouting, "See, Leonora was right. Laughter can gild anything." He hushes hope politely, one step at a time. Still, he allows a private smile. He stirs, more delicately than earlier, whispering the mantra used by Catalan alchemist Arnold of Villanova: humidum igni, siccum, aqua, moisten with fire, dry with water. It's nonsense physics, but lovely paradox, and good paradox is like comedic timing for the soul. Molten surface shivers. A lazy burp of gas pops, spraying sparks. One lands on his sleeve. He pats it out, remarking to the empty room, "Note, romantic flashbacks may increase flambe risk." Joke 4. Safely delivered. Mercury remains stoic, but possibly rolling its metaphorical eyes. Color shifts settle into a calmer, pewter gold. He judges temperature, adjusts airflow, then closes the door. The rituals practiced, yet tonight every motion feels braided with memory. each gesture an echo of how he once lifted Leonora onto a stone ledge to see the comet streaking overhead. That comet looked gold, too, until clouds swallowed it yet. The glow persisted in her eyes for hours. He records the visual change in his book. Edges tinged aurum rose. Then beneath adds, personal note, lavender triggered, profound recall. Ingredient synergy between scent and memory. Experiment, test assorted aromas, next cycle, and log emotional temperature. He almost laughs at the notion of charting emotional temperature. Scholars would scoff. Then again, scholars once believed spontaneous generation produced mice from wheat and sweaty socks. So he's not losing sleep. A glance at the hourglass. Fresh cycle begun. He leans back, rubbing a knot from his neck. He imagines Leonora's fingers there. Gentle, she once joked. She could knead tension out of a granite gargoyle. Gargoyles, for record, never complained. He truly wonders if. Historians still argue whether genius flourishes in solitude or partnership. He can testify solitude breeds tidy workspaces and echoing halls. Partnership breeds risk of heartbreak, but also laughter, loud enough to scare dust from rafters. Tonight, he'd welcome rafters, rattled by laughter. A chill races up his spine. He fetches a wool shawl, drapes it, and sits again. The shawl smells of winter, storage cedar and pepper, nothing of lavender. Yet his mind keeps slipping to summers by the river, where they argued about whether stars were holes in a cosmic shell or balls of burning gas. She suspected the latter. He clung to the poetry of the former. Centuries later, astronomers settled the debate in her favor, but he still cherishes the cosmic shell image. It's the prettier losing team. He stands abruptly, fetches a small vial of lavender oil from the apothecary's shelf, purchased last year to soothe headaches but seldom used. He considers adding a drop to the crucible, aromatic offering, bridging memory and matter. It's absurd, possibly disastrous, but then again, turning lead into gold is hardly a sensible hobby. He hesitates, lifts the vial to nose scent crisp, floral, edged with subtle spice. Decision made, one drop only. He unhooks the furnace port, flicks a speck of oil inside. A faint hiss, barely audible, followed by a whiff of sweetness layered over metallic heat. No explosion, thankfully. Just a rebellious perfume swirl. He exhales relief. Joke 5 arrives uninvited. Congratulations. You've pioneered the world's first artisanal scented, alloy perfect for hipster crowns. He snorts at his own joke. A crown would be nice, albeit a tad heavy for checking mail. He records the addition, underlining experimental. If results skew wildly, future historians can blame the lavender and leave his reputation mostly intact. He notes that too, because self-deprecating footnotes keep grandeur at bay. While alloy simmers, he tidies the bench, stacking ingot shavings, wiping stray flecks of salt. The orderliness feels like apology manifestsy. Leonora, I can keep things neat when I try. Another memory surfaces, her explaining how she organized herb jars by color of effect, blue labels for calming, red for invigorating, green for digestive rescue. He teased her for turning chemistry into a fashion chart. She retorted that he turned romance into a word problem. Score 1 to Leonora. He laughs off, sincerend. The sound surprises him. Laughter hasn't echoed here in too long. It startles dust motes into chaotic ballet. he decides to keep laughing periodically, even if only the mercury listens. A croquette of joy inside gloom, he muses, prevents the heart from curdling like neglected custard. At last, the hourglass nears its end. He opens the furnace again. Surface gleams brighter now, trembles with tiny ripples that catch the glow, reminding him of sunlit rivers where Leonora skipped stones. He dips the rod, lifts a bead, transfers it to a cooling plate. As it solidifies, he inspects the bead, still gray, but flecked with minute sparkles, like stardust trapped in granite. Maybe impurities, maybe progress. He shrugs. Even stardust was once an impurity in somebody's dark. He records meticulously, sketches the bead, circles sparkles, adds question mark. Research thrives on question marks, they're the universal. Eyebrows of curiosity. A yawn arrives, ambush style. He pinches the bridge of his nose, recalls Rosemary's claim to stave off fatigue, tempted to chew a sprig, but decides midnight. Dental hygiene issues outweigh potential perk-ups. Instead, he satisfies the 3 jokes per 1,000 words rule with a parting quip. If this continues, I'll patent caffeinated lavender for academics on deadline. The idea sounds simultaneously absurd and marketable, like goat milk, lattes. He tops the page with one final note. Lavender cycle concludes. Sentiment heavy, focus restored. Next, reassess alloy density at dawn. The fragrance has faded to memory now, but the echoes linger throbbing gently behind every breath, reminding him that metals aren't the only stubborn things seeking transformation. Hearts, too, insist on second smeltings. He sits a moment, longer, letting the lesson settle. Lead remains, lead at least, for now, but within its dull mass and his newly stirred recollections lies a shine deeper than bullion. Whether or not the crucible agrees by sunrise, he knows one truth: gold's first glimmer appears not in metal, but in the eyes of someone who makes you laugh at your own seriousness. That, he realizes, is a transmutation no furnace can replicate. He exhales, straightens his posture, rotates the hourglass once more, and readies for the next delicate phase, carrying Lavender's ghost in the warm chambers of his chest. Asterisk midnight glides in almost imperceptibly, a velvet ribbon sliding across the sky. And the alchemist, ever punctual to the hour when day's gossip finally dozes, begins the second ritual of the night, hiding in plain sight. With a practiced flick, he trims each candle's wick, lowering their flames until the workshop glows only faintly enough light to see crucibles. Not enough to draw curtain-twitching eyes from the lane outside. Shadows gather like cloaked conspirators, draping benches, blurring the hard edges of glassware. Even the hourglass wears a sable hood now, its brass caps winking quietly beneath a coat of darkness. He moves to shutter the single window fully. Earlier it stood ajar for ventilation, but now secrecy outmuscles fresh air on the priority chart. Centuries of predecessors whisper at his back, reminding him how quickly curiosity can morph into accusation. One latch refuses metal, warped. With age so, he wedges a sliver of pine beneath and wiggles until the stubborn hinge yields with a sulky clank. There, the night outside remains undisturbed. No glimmers escaping to alert gossip gourmets like Widow Brom across the street, who treats neighborhood lights as personal entertainment. Last week, She spread rumors the blacksmith's apprentice was forging counterfeit coins because she saw sparks at 2 a.m. Turns out he'd merely burnt dinner. The alchemist smiles if culinary ineptitude counted as sorcery. Half the village bakery staff would be on trial. He checks the door next, sliding home an iron bolt. A strip of felt along the threshold stops telltale smoke from curling beneath. With each precaution, his pulse slows. These motions are muscle memory, choreography, inherited from teachers who worked in eras far less forgiving. Mainstream fact: in 1317, Pope John XXII issued the bull Spondent Quas non exhibit, condemning alchemists who claimed to mint gold but delivered worthless alloys, lumping honest experimenters with frauds and sorcerers alike. Some practitioners fled cities, others retreated to cellars. A few adopted pen names, so ornate they might as well have worn powdered wigs for anonymity. Our alchemist's own mentor published under Irenaeus Philolethus, which roughly translates to peaceful lover of truth, but functioned as please don't arrest me. He wanders back to the furnace, adjusting airflow so flames dim, to a dull thin rod inserted through a brick. Crack measures draft if smoke grazes the ceiling instead of sipping the flue. He will know the neighbors might soon sniff brimstone. Tonight the draft behaves. Smoke climbs obediently, carrying lavender's final wisps into the star-speckled chill, where even clouds respect confidentiality. Secrecy, he muses, isn't merely camouflage, it's theater. Medieval alchemists loved a good masquerade, codenames, cryptic diagrams, allegorical beasts, devouring suns. They claimed it was to protect sacred knowledge from unworthy hands, though scholars still argue whether those veils hid genuine discoveries or simply glossed over gaps in understanding. He suspects the answer straddles both sides, a mix of caution, ego, and the universal human urge to make an ordinary Tuesday feel like an epic quest. He remembers visiting Master Fulgonis' workshop for the first time. Every jar numbered instead of labeled, every formula penned in a private cipher. When he asked why, the master quipped, "Obscurity keeps snoops confused while I finish my tea." Effective strategy tea time remained tranquil, even when constables prowled the district, sniffing for counterfeiters. Tea and secrecy, formidable allies. The old man chuckles, pulls on a snug cloth cap to trap stray hair, and lifts a battered wooden panel that conceals his own masterstroke of stealth, a set of sliding shutters. Inside the chimney throat. By angling them just so, he diffuses any sudden flare into 3 smaller plumes, making furnace bursts resemble a harmless cook stove. Hardly Michelin star cuisine, but the illusion breakfasts on skepticism before town gossip even gets out of bed. He tests the sliders smooth, no squeaks. These he crafted using leftover lead sheets hammered thin as parchment, affixed with iron nails blackened in vinegar to avoid reflection. A quirky tidbit bubbles up. Some 16th century alchemists painted their ceilings night blue and dotted them with fake stars, reasoning that if prying eyes saw a glow through roof slats, they'd mistake it for open sky. Impractical in daylight, but points for creativity. He spared that extravagance, though part of him fancies installing constellations, if only to name one widow Brahms' nosy nebula. With chimney cloaked, he returns to the bench, retrieves a small volume bound in goatskin. Its spine bears no title. Inside, Symbols coil like mischievous snakes, green lions, devouring suns, red kings, marrying white queens. The alchemist opens to tonight's working page, where his neat script translates obscurity into measurable steps. Each reagent listed twice, once plainly, once disguised under deckmen or cover names. Because nothing says, "Trust me," like calling sulfur the fiery brother and water the weeping child. A little melodrama keeps ordinary folk away. Besides, if authorities confiscated the book, they'd assume it was some poet's ill-advised attempt at mythic fan fiction and, frankly, not be wrong. He sharpens a graphite stick pencils. Are still luxury imports. Fragile and expensive, and pencils, tiny adjustments beside Mercury's symbol, reduce by half grain next cycle. Lavender droplet, possibly influencing surface tension. He pauses to grin, imagine a future where students highlight textbooks instead of hiding them. He doubts posterity will lament the death of alchemical ciphers. Modern bureaucrats already fill forms with codes incomprehensible to mortal eyes. A low clatter interrupts reflection. He freezes, listening. Only the garden gate, nudging in the windrusty hinge, crooning its midnight lullaby. Still, caution prevails. He darts to the peephole board discreetly into the doorframe. Outside, lane lies empty, save for two stray cats practicing synchronized loitering beneath a lamppost. One yawns theatrically. He salutes their commitment to nocturnal art. Returning, he notes how adrenaline prickles skin, fear used to feel thrilling, electricity coursing through youthful veins. But now, it's more like drinking too much, espresso exciting, for 60 seconds, then exhausting. He sighs and shakes out tension by rolling his shoulders, muttering joke number 1 for the hour. If anyone asks, I'm just baking insomnia into fancy loaf shapes. The mercury bubble in its cup remains unmoved. Crowd tonight. He resumes preparation for the next ingredient stage. From a locked tin, he extracts small vials labeled sun dew, lunar tears, and kitchen salt. The third is exactly what it claims, because sometimes the best hiding place is plain truth nestled among fantasy. He unseals the salt, pinches a measured quantity onto a copper dish. Salt granules sparkle like tiny star shards, foreshadowing a hoped-for golden cosmos within the crucible. He glances toward a corner where a water barrel stands conveniently near a drain. In worst case, emergencies, flames, misbehaving, lead spatter, he can douse trouble quickly. Safety first, even when no union rep inspects the lab. He reminds himself aloud, lead showers aren't spa approved. Joke number 2 delivered. His own grin answers. A new thought, Seidelson. Earlier the lavender drop seemed harmless, but secrecy also means keeping meticulous logs of every deviation. Hidden experiments killed more alchemists than public ridicule ever did. He jots a margin note. If lavender influences alloy stability, record separate batch for replication. Scientific method may be centuries from formal codification, yet he knows reproducibility is the difference between miracle and rumor. Another memory surfaces, this one less romantic than bureaucratic. The town magistrate once summoned him after reports of strange green smoke rising from his chimney. He brought cakes as peace offering and spun a tale about brewing medicinal salves for livestock. Magistrate, a rotund man fond of butter and minimal thinking, munched cake, nodded sagely, and fined him 2 chickens for atmospheric disturbance. Since then, the alchemist bakes decoy pastries weekly, distributing them around. Local children call him the Smoky Baker. His pastries taste faintly of licorice and existential dread, but bribes smell sweeter than suspicion. Joke number 3. A moment on the lips, a repercussion for the snitch. He logs it, mentally humor quota satisfied. He regards the crucible. Inside, the molten mass has quieted, adopting a viscous, reflective calm. Tonight's hush feels thicker, and almost sentient. Silence you could bounce a thought off it and hear an echo. He takes that as permission to advance, the salt offering first, followed by the tiniest splash of sun dew, distilled morning moisture scraped from garden leaves, or, if you prefer less poetic stock phrases, water. Dec nomen, again, but it adds ritual weight. Opening the furnace door, he sprinkles the salt across the surface in a spiral. Crystals snap and hiss, releasing minuscule fireworks of white sparks. He watches them dissolve, each pop reminiscent of campfire sap crackling. He imagines suspicion dissolving likewise if handled with equal care. Unfortunately, some gossip grains expand rather than melt. He closes the door, sets the timer, and fetches his cipher tools, reed pen, a pot of Ferris gall ink, and a sheet of thin vellum. He begins drafting a full coded account of the evening. Rows of interlaced symbols, unfurled triangles, kissing circles, serpents biting tails. At first glance, nonsense. To the trained eye, a clear recipe. He documents not only measurements, but also emotional weather, lavender memory surge, cautionary warmth. In his margin, he adds a private star symbol, signifying do not publish, because secrets nested within secrets satisfy his aging inner trickster. While ink dries, he contemplates the ethics of concealment. Does disguising knowledge hinder collective progress? Or does it grant experimentation space to stumble without public scorn? Historians still argue whether the secrecy culture ultimately slowed chemistry or protected it from premature condemnation. He used to champion full transparency until a jealous colleague pinched half his notebook and nearly poisoned 3 apprentices, misreading an abbreviation. Since then, he locks knowledge until he trusts both interpreter and context. A draft slides under the door. Curious, High investigates only the night pressing cold fingers through cracks. Still, he slides heavier logs across the hearth-in casewind, sucks sparks outward and tosses on another scoop of charcoal. The fire answers with a contented roar, quickly moderated by the disguised baffles overhead. No stray glow betrays him. His little theater light cues stay within script lines. He settles onto the high back stool, the one with a squeak timed to his size. Sinking into worn leather, he lets mind wander over a map of his neighborhood, tavern down the hill, whose lanterns burn until last call. The miller's house, where grindstones vibrate floors at dawn, and behind them all, the looming abbey bell tolling hours indifferent to worldly ambitions, including clandestine metallurgy. That bell is due again soon. He counts, estimates maybe 40 minutes left before a single solemn dong announces to AM, the hour when even owls consider. Decaf, he contemplates a Schwarbreakwater, a sliver of bread, but chooses instead to pace, gently swinging arms to counter creeping chill. Every step taps floorboards, drumming a muffled heartbeat. Secrecy's metronome, he whispers, half joking, half prayer. May Widow Brahm's earwax be plentiful tonight. Joke number 4. He might be over quota, yet humor seldom triggers audits. While pacing, he rehearses plausible excuses for unexpected visitors. For magistrates, routine assay of mine, or for civic ventures. For clergy, experimenting with improved bell bronze to honor the saints. For children, making glow in dark marbles patent pending. He rehearses facial expressions, tunacent bewilderment, scholarly gravitas, kindly but firm dismissal, acting lessons, courtesy of years, dodging creditors. He pauses by shelves lined with dried herbs, contemplating future olfactory deceptions, myrrh smoke to mask metallic temps, cinnamon bark to suggest festive baking. There's precedence. One 17th century alchemist disguised stinky experiments by timing them during public feast days, overshadowing the smell with roast boar. Quirky fringe legend claims he once pinned a free samples signout, so nosy neighbors helped themselves to pork instead of suspicion. Crowd control through comfort food dash ingenious dot. The furnace timer pings, gentle as a spoon against china. He glides back, opens the door. Molten surface sparkles more brightly, tiny. Flecks rising and sinking like lazy fireflies in syrup. He notes color warmer, hint of tarnished bronze instead of cold pewter. Progress, maybe. He stirs thrice sunwise, once widdershins. A motion purely superstitious, yet strangely satisfying. Talk about placebo paddling if it keeps morale afloat. Heel row, door closed. He scratches updates in cipher, then picks up a small bellows hidden under the bench. Not for air, this time inside, powdered charcoal mixed with crushed acorns. He pumps a puff across the floorboards, darkening any stray footprints of pale salt that could betray unusual midnight activity by morning light. Cheap detective repellent, basically. Joke number 5. CSI, cottage scene investigation, has been cancelled due to budget soot. Dust settles. He relaxes. Nights like these remind him that transformation flourishes best in a hush thick enough to hear. Atoms rearranging, yet he accepts that hush must coexist with daily life's clatter. Tomorrow, village roosters will crow, kids will chase hoops, Widow Brahm will recount fresh rumors, and he'll smile politely, fingerprints scrubbed, experiments banked in coded pages, secrets safe behind felt-lined shutters. As the bell in the Abbey Tower finally groans its solitary note across the valley, he stands by the furnace hand, on warm brick, and nods to the shadows. They nod back at least. He imagines they do. For another precious hour or two, alchemy remains a private moonlit dialogue between lead, longing, and a man who knows that sometimes gold's first defense is simply not being seen until it's ready to shine. A slow, contented burble rises from the crucible soft, as broth simmering on a hearth while the alchemist leans against the bench, letting warmth press gently through layers of wool and worry. Outside, Abbey bells settle into post to a .m. Silence. Inside, a different clock ticks in his chest, loud enough to drown a cricket. That internal metronome, it seems, has decided tonight is perfect for dredging up a long-neglected chapter. The moment ambition trampled family like an ox. Cart on market day, he begins polishing a copper alembic to keep hands busy, but memories need no invitation. They tumble out, bright and raw, as freshly poured mercury. His younger sister Mara, waving from their cottage gate, cheeks smudged by flour, shouting he should write more often, you hopeless genius, he had promised innocently, sincerely yet. Months stretched, then years. Letters unsent turned into dust-lined bundles, still tucked somewhere beneath his desk, sealed by procrastination and pride. The ink inside them is probably thicker than the stew he forgot on the stove last solstice. Steam from the crucible curls ceiling ward, and in its drifting shapes he almost sees Mara's flowery face morph into their father's weather-creased. Glare-stern, yes, but laced with hope. Father expected his eldest son to return after study, to share hard-earned skills repairing plows or casting bells. Instead, the alchemist penned home exactly 1 coin's worth of gold, ostensibly proof of progress. The paint flaked off during the first frost, leaving a church cross-mottled and embarrassing. According to Cousin Joss, villagers joked it looked like the moon had caught chicken pox. Joke number 1 tonight. Nothing says divine inspiration like patchy, paltry, lunar art. He drags a sleeve across eyes that suddenly burn. Regret, he discovers, is heavier than lead. At least lead eventually melts. Family disappointment, though, can stay stubbornly solid for decades. He stirs the alloy, half hoping each metallic swirl might dissolve guilt molecules. Spoiler alert, guilt is not water-soluble. Medieval soap can't touch it. A new bubble pops, echoing like a scolding click of Mara's tongue. He recalls skipping her wedding, the first of many milestones. Missed because a patron dangled access to rare antimony over the same weekend. Antimony 1, the family seat at the feast, sat empty. The cake, rumor claims, was excellent, though not nearly as rich as siblings' side eyes when his absence was toasted. Historians still argue whether alchemists prioritized scholarly duty over kin loyalty or simply hid insecurities behind crucibles. He suspects a messy mixture of both. Alchemy rarely yields pure substances. The furnace sighs, flame dimming a shade. He adjusts airflow, grateful for mechanical distraction. Mainstream fact interjects itself. In 14th century guild towns, artisans were legally obligated to train their children in the trade or pay stiff fines. Imagine City Hall mailing a penalty notice reading, your kid chose astronomy fork over to hens. His father, a smith, surely felt that pressure. The alchemist's academic detour left hammer and anvil legacy dangling, unfulfilled. No hens exchanged hands, but resentment fattened on the breach. Copper, alembic, polished. He sets it aside, feeling its gleam mock his tarnished conscience. He takes up a rag, rubs smudges off the window shutter that conceals the peephole. Reflection. Stares back, wrinkles under eyes, soot smudge on cheek. He sees hints of his mother in that reflection. Same drop of eyelids when tired, same stubborn chin. Mother wrote once, asking if the philosopher's stone could cure arthritis. He never replied, because the experiment then felt too delicate to pause. The stone remained elusive, her joints remained stiff, and the letter remained unanswered. An unsent ingredient for tonight's guilt cauldron. A fringe tidbit surfaces from the depths of his reading. Certain 15th century apothecaries made poultices from crushed emeralds, believing green gemstones drew poison from aching joints. Talk about pricey placebo and elbow wraps, worth a duke's ransom. He never tried emerald therapy on Mother, though perhaps glitter alone might have brightened her day more than silence. The crucible hum pulls him back. He opens the furnace door. Heat brushes his face, the same fierce warmth family once offered when he returned briefly during a midwinter chill. That visit ended with him leaving before dawn, citing urgent matters of transmutation. In truth, he couldn't bear Father's disappointed quiet, so he fled like a thief from love. Joke number 2. Breaking news. Scientist discovers teleportation. Turns out it's just sprinting away from emotional conversations. He ladles a small sample into a shallow mold, watching metal sheen settle, enough to show a ghostly face. He imagines offering it to Mara, a token apology. But apologies, like alchemy, require proper timing and genuine heat. Cold lead tokens only bruise toes when dropped. Sighing, he documents color and viscosity in his cipher. Though handwriting wobbles, he pauses, nibbling quill, then writes a candid margin note in plain script, no code. Remember to send letter to family. Maybe not gold, maybe words. The simplicity feels rebellious. Suddenly, faint chimes, outside wind bells, on Widow Brahm's porch, tinkling like snarky pixies. He jokes to the workshop shadows number 3. Even the bells gossip is a small town. Confidentiality expires at sunrise, yet the jibe rings hollow. After all, what stories might family be telling about the absent brother? Hero, madman. Footnote. He fears the last most oblivion masquerading as neutrality. He unwraps a cloth bundle from a high shelf. Inside lies a small iron horseshoe he forged as an apprentice smith before academia lured him away. The iron still bears punch marks. Where father adjusted curvature, he runs fingers over those familiar dents, each a lesson hammered into metal and memory. He had intended to present the horseshoe to his youngest brother on his naming day. Instead, it aged alone in shadow. Now iron reminds him of what could have been bridged had he carried it home. And yet he hesitates. Years stretch. After decades, land like doves or like bricks. Scholars debate that privately, though parchments seldom survive long enough to gather data. One answer glows from the furnace. Metals heat gradually too sudden, and they crack. Perhaps family hearts abide similar metallurgy, slow warming, better than flash fire apologies. He fetches parchment, composes rough lines. Dear Mara, dear mother, dear father. Quill hovers, words tangle. He curses softly, though still dash it all, then pivots to scrap vellum, practicing sentences without commitment. I have thought of you every season, true but syrupy. My work consumed me, true but cowardly. Emerges slipping through ink. Turns out turning lead into gold is easier than turning stubbornness into humility. He smirks, then underlines the sentence twice. Maybe honesty thrives on humor. The crucible pops louder, demanding attention. He stands, sliding letter draft beneath a pestle, the universal paperweight. Stirring again, he senses viscosity thickening. A good sin. He sprinkles crushed quartz dust, the weeping child, from his deck. Nomen list, hoping its silica will coax impurities to surface as dross. Floating scum forms quickly. He skims it, marveling how easily slag reveals itself under heat. Shame humans lack tongs to lift out grudges. So neatly he tries a mental exercise. Leonora once recommended, list 3 shining moments with family. Memory, eager to please, delivers building a tree swing for Mara, laughter ringing like wind. Chimes, teaching little brother Tom the difference between tin and silver by bite tests, sadly outdated dentistry. And mother humming sea shanties while shelling peas, voice shocking in power despite her size. The recollection softens inner stiffness, like beeswax warming in palms. Mainstream fact slides in again. Medieval households often spanned 3 generations under one smoky roof. Then was double betrayal emotional and fiscal. Father's smithy could have prospered with an extra pair of skilled hands. Instead, rumors reached him of lean years, tools sold, apprentices laid off. Pride, apparently, runs in the family. Quench bucket gurgles as a stray ember drops within a damp hiss, small jolt. He seizes the moment to lighten mood. Maybe if I'd stayed. He chuckles, though laughter ricochets strangely off gloom. Time to measure progress scientifically. He removes a bead, quenches it, then scratches surface with the jeweler's loop. Under magnification. MICRO fractures appear where lead crystals shift orientation, necessary prerequisite before phase change. He notes, encouraging lattice, circles it. Not exactly lab protocol, but tonight, data and confession cohabitate. Cramped fingers protest. He flexes them, noticing soot under nails, evidence of devotion or neglect, depending on standpoint. He recalls mother scolding child him for dirty hands at supper. A clean meal begins with clean fingers. He used to rinse until knuckles shone. Now soap seldom meets skin. Crucibles do. He bows head briefly, muscle memory of childhood grace, then continues. He decides to pour the alloy into an intermediary mold, shaped like a coin, a test to see if luster retains after cooling. Coin molds line a shelf, relics from earlier, more naive attempts to impress investors. He chooses the smallest, greased with tallow, sets it under the crucible spout. Molten metal streams, thick and glowing, pooling with a hiss and tiny spark flashes. The bright disk reminds him of the gold piece he once promised to send home soon. That promise aged badly like cider, forgotten in sun, but maybe this coin, even if still mostly lead, can symbolize new intent as it cools. He etches a tiny M on the surface using a steel scriber. For Mara, maybe childlike, maybe sentimental, but metals remember marks long after breath halts. He sets the coin on an oak board to cure, then adds a note in ledger. Coin for sister deliver, regardless of finish. Deliver, a heavier verb than ask, wish, or hope. He catches himself sniffing the Arano lavender now. Instead, scent of oak, salt, a whiff of rosemary root tinder. Strange how each fragrance triggered distinct memories. Lavender for love, rosemary for guilt. He wonders if oak smoke will summon fortitude. Quirky tidbit. Some Saxon tribes blessed newborns with smoldering oak leaves, believing the wood lent strength. Perhaps rituals matter only as far as participants choose to believe. Tonight, he chooses yes. He tosses an oak sliver onto the furnace. Coals. A warm, earthy aroma rises. He inhales deeply, letting it ground him. Letter still waits. He pulls it out. Scars parchment with decisive strokes. I have built castles in the fire and neglected the home that raised me. I ask your patience once more. I send what gold I can these words, and beg to craft better bridges henceforth. He stops. Not perfect, but sincere. He signs with full name, first time in years he's used family surname, wax seal. For stamp, finds only an old signet bearing early alchemical cipher that won't do. Instead, he takes the warm M coin, presses its edge into melted candle wax, creating a rough imprint. Imperfect seal echoes imperfect. Symmetry. He addresses parchment, sets it near cool night window where wax will harden swiftly. He glances at the coin mold, still dull gray. Gold may yet elude, but for once he sees beauty in plain alloy. It contains promise, weight, and the letters echo. He imagines Mara opening envelope years late, but smiling anyway at clumsy wax crest. Fatigue finally plants Suncor in limbs. He sits, hugging shawl, watching crucible glow steady. Regrets, he concludes, are like unrefined or worthless until examined, heated, skimmed, reshaped. Family ties like metals might endure furnace trials if given time and certain faith. The letter is first ladle of slag removed. More will follow, but tonight, progress enough. He updates notebook one last time, regret refined through remembrance. Alloy stable, path home reopened. Then below, a smaller line lingering like hush after prayer. Gold may define wealth. Forgiveness defines worth. Crucible bubbles softly, as though approving this new alloy of humility and hope. He rests chin on folded arms, letting eyelids drift half-closed. Lead cools, letter dries, and somewhere, he imagines, a sibling laughs in her sleep, unknowing that at this precise minute her wayward brother finally measured the true cost of alchemy and began to pay it back, word by word, coin by coin. Asterisk, asterisk, the alloy settles into a slow, hypnotic roll, thick ripples, skating across its surface as though the molten mass has found a tide of its own. Watching the ebb and flow, the alchemist feels a different current tug inside him, one that draws him backward to a night much like this. When firelight flickered over cracked stone walls, and obsession claimed its first true casualty in his life. Master Philigenus. He adjusts the furnace vent, searching for the exact hiss that tells him temperature holds steady, then drags the stool closer. The glow fills his field of vision until everything beyond the brick mouth blurs. In that orange glare, he sees again the cramped lecture room where Philigenus first scrawled a legendary formula across a soot-smudged board. Lines of Latin abbreviations that looked more like a treasure map for dragons than a chemistry lesson. He remembers the thrill, the tiny shock of possibility sparking through every apprentice present. What he doesn't usually linger on is how those same glowing symbols eventually stoked rivalries hot enough to kill. A gentle clink breaks the trances, stirring rod, bumping a beaker. He takes it as cue and begins measuring the obsession blend. A mixture Philigenus insisted activated latent potential in lead. Even now, the smell bitter galbanum resin mixed with a peppery dash of orris root pulls a string of memories. Taut, he still recalls, leaning over the bench as a young student, paling at the sharp fumes, while the old master barked, "If the scent makes you weep, the metal will weep gold." Historians still argue whether the recipe held genuine catalytic merit or simply served as a form of hazing for wide-eyed novices. Either way, the class went through more handkerchiefs than a plague ward. He grinds the mixture with a mortar and pestle, The rhythmic crunch echoing footsteps he once followed down a monastery corridor, trailing Master Fulginius to a locked cellar, known only to senior apprentices. There, amid rows of dusty instruments, stood a second furnace smaller, hotter where the master tested a condensed path to gold. Only a chosen pair of students assisted, himself and Adelmo, a charming, sharp-featured rival whose smile hid blades. Adelmo and he competed for every scrap of praise, each determined to become heir to Fulginius's secrets. They argued about ratios, haggled over furnace shifts, even timed who could recitage a Brian correspondence fastest. Looking back, the alchemist marvels they never tried measuring who could inhale the most mercury vapors without fainting. Though there was that one near miss. The pestle slips, scattering a puff of powder onto the bench. He taps it back, remembering a night when Adelmo snatched the pestle mid-grind, complaining the alchemist's strokes were too timid. Alchemy favors boldness, Adelmo said, flexing theatrically. Fuliginus chuckled, but the alchemist saw the flash of irritation behind the old man's eyes. Pride, apparently, was the hidden reagent everyone kept adding. He flicks the final pinch of powdered blend into the crucible. A brief flare of green rises, like a serpent licking air, then fades. The scent, pungent and sweet, wraps the room. This time, high-sizenly water, a touch call, it veterans' tolerance, or tear ducts too tired for theatrics. He sets the hourglass, then leans back, letting memory run its next reel. The master's death came suddenly, one dawn, after a night of private experimentation in the locked cellar. Fulginus was found slumped beside the smaller furnace, skin puckered by dark splotches, lips tinged blue. The official verdict: accidental inhalation of arsenic vapors and occupational hazard for anyone turning stones into dreams. Yet rumors blossomed faster than mold on rye. Some whispered Fulginus discovered a near-perfect elixir and paid the price of success. Others claimed sabotage. A few insisted he staged his death to keep secrets from both church and crown, living incognito as a wandering glassblower. The alchemist never believed the last Fuliginus loved attention too dearly to fake a tale without applause. The most persistent whisper, though, pointed to Adelmo. Their rivalry had grown barbed in the weeks before the tragedy. Adelmo accused the alchemist of hoarding notes. The alchemist accused Adelmo of diluting reagents to sabotage tests. Fuliginus tried to referee, but his patience wore thin. Then, 3 days before he died, the master changed the cellar locks and refused both apprentices' entry. The night he perished, only 2 copies of the new key existed, one in his pocket, the other missing to this day. A bubble snaps in the crucible, startling him back. He skims away emerging dross, noting how debris clusters on one side, leaving a relatively clear oval at center, like an eye peering up. The sight reminds him of the moment he bent over Fulgonus' remains and saw that same glassy stare, pupils reflecting furnace glow. For years, nightmares replayed that scene with cruel fidelity. He unrolls a sheet of copper foil, intending to cap the crucible for a short reflux stage. As he crimps edges, another piece of the story presses against his thoughts. The inquest. Town magistrates questioned every apprentice, demanded ledgers, measured arsenic stores. They found traces of a rare additive Realgrin Fulgonus cup of wine. Realgar, bright orange and deadly, featured in only one experiment the old man entrusted to Adlamo. Yet magistrates never proved intent. Perhaps Fulginius handled realgar after pouring wine, transferring residue. Case closed. Adelmo walked free, packing his instruments, vanishing over the city gate before the funeral pyres cooled. Years later, the alchemist heard rumors Adelmo re-emerged in Prague, styling himself Dr. Rory, peddling tinctures claiming to heal heartbreak and hemophilia. Quirky tidbit: a Prague broadsheet from that era advertises liquid sunlight, guarantee to polish dull humors, suspiciously similar to Fulginius's unpublished formula footnotes. The alchemist clipped that broadsheet, pinned it under a jar of mothballs, kept evidence from fluttering away. He tilts the hourglass. Sand whispers down like secrets too heavy to linger. He addresses the silent room. If only justice flowed as easily. Joke number 1 tonight, albeit dry. He wonders if Adelmo ever lies awake, hearing Master's final cough echo in imagination. Guilt, like lead, might warp, but seldom evaporate. He lowers the copper cap onto the crucible. At once, vapor condenses against its underside, forming trembling beads. He remembers Fuliginus preaching that condensation mirrors the cycle of human ambition. Rise, transform, fall, repeat. Even kings distill, he would say, wiping sweaty brow. But only fools forget to collect their own condensation lessons lost in the air. He never clarified the metaphor. Perhaps he meant we should salvage wisdom from our mistakes, instead of letting it dissipate like aromatics from an uncorked bottle. Steam wraiths curl around the cap edges. For safety, he threads a narrow copper tube through a vent to collect any escaping vapor. Modern physicians might call this good ventilation practice. Fuliginus called it courting the spirit without suffocating her. Historians still argue whether personifying laboratory fumes helped focus or simply caused rampant anthropomorphism among early chemists. Either way, the habit stuck. Tonight, the alchemist greets the first plume with a nod. Evening spirit. Mind the eyebrows. Joke #2. He consults his notes from earlier attempts. Fulgonus' original ratios were lost. But over decades, the alchemist reconstructed fragments through diligent trial and, admittedly, a touch of guesswork bordering on spiritual seance. Yet, one component still eluded him, the intended catalyst at the moment of reflux. Some claimed it was gold chloride. Others suggested powdered deer antler. The more outlandish theory, a single teardrop from the alchemist who stirs the mix, ensuring the heart's truth enters the reaction. Even he, lover of metaphor, finds that recipe suspiciously weepy. Still, he recalls Fulginus wiping eyes more often than fumes should justify. He sighs dry and chooses pragmatism. He measures a grain of stibnite powder, antimony sulfide, grinding it to ultrafine dust. Antimony, Fuliginus argued, is the midwife of metals. She delivers transformation, but bears no child herself. As the dust slides into the vapors, a sharp, crackling response resonates. The crucible shifts color to deep plum for a heartbeat before settling into its previous glow. The alchemist's pulse races, plum flash, last recorded in his lab decades ago, preceded the most promising transmutation attempt interrupted by a furnace collapse that injured 2 assistants and incinerated half his archives. He inhales slowly, reminding jittery nerves that coincidences exist. while alloy simmers under its copper dome. He returns, Tofulganis death. Somewhere in the workshop, a battered, leather-bound tome holds the master's annotated marginalia, pages he salvaged from the cellar after authorities cleared out. He pulls the book from a shelf, lays it next to the hourglass. Its cover smells of char and old myrrh. He opens to a flagged page where a small ink star marks Fulginius's final entry. Seek convergence of rival principles, solve conjugatum. The phrase frustrated him for years. Was conjugatum a numeric ratio, a coded reference to Adelmo, a warning? He once presented the line at a scholarly moot. Debate raged for hours. No agreement reached. That moot ended in mild scandal when two professors dueled with chalksticks over Latin ablative usage. Academia, never dull. He traces the star with a shaky fingertip, then does something he avoided for decades. He leans closer and inhales lightly. Yes, there, faint but distinct, the peppery orris scent of the obsession blend dries into paper fibers. Fulgonius wrote these lines while the mixture perfumed air. Same as tonight. The alchemist shivers, feeling specters circle. He closes the book, mind spinning. What if conjugate wasn't chemical at all? Suppose Fulginius, caught between two feuding pupils, saw that rival energy itself as the missing catalyst to metals, two minds forced into cooperation to birth gold. If so, his locking them out was fatal, not to them but to himself, isolating the reaction prematurely. An insight, perhaps, but one that cost his life. The furnace lid trembles, pressure builds. He loosens the vent, allowing vapor to travel the copper tube, where it condenses into a chilled receiver. Droplets drip into a quartz vial, 1, 2, 3 each, tiny sphere, glimmering like melted tourmaline. He caps the vial quickly. Fumes like these can pickle lungs faster than Widow Brahm can spread scandal. A high-pitched whine reveals the alloy's viscosity, shifting again. He lifts the lid briefly, peers at swirling currents, tinted a subtle rose-gold under-plum undertones. Seen that combination? Could it be luck, lavender, antimony, or memory itself, bending destiny? He stirs carefully, though thought teeters. Should he invite a rival to complete this conjugate? Too late for a demo, unpredictable for a new apprentice. Perhaps rivalry isn't strictly external. Maybe the contest between hope and doubt inside his own head suffices. Hope stirs clockwise, doubt Witterschen. The alloy appears to tolerate both. He chuckles, joke number 3. At least the voices in my head pay rent in innovation. Mercury sulks in its vial, still humorless. Time to record observations. He writes, obsession blend deployed. Plum flash. Indicates antimony assimilation. Possible stage comparable. Tofulganis' final attempt. Then, a bold underline. Watch for plum to fade into pale sunrise. The phrase pale sunrise comes straight from the master's last lecture. He'd said, when night gives way within the crucible, the first gold dawns pale, poetic to a fault. That man, the hourglass empties. He tops furnace fuel, deciding on a short cooling interval before next step. During lull, he inspects the salvaged pages again. Under different light, a faint grease stain emerges near the margin line. Residue, realgar, tainted. Could this be the fingerprint evidence magistrates missed? He turns the page, holds it over the furnace glow. Residue shimmers, dull, orange arsenic signature. if memory serves. He feels a jolt, maybe fuliginous spilled reagent himself, contaminating his cup accidentally. If so, Adelmo's rumored guilt of his own suspicions, sclaps like an untempered crucible. He sits, stunned. For decades, he let suspicion shape his path, fuel isolation, justify frenzied need to finish what the master began. If the death was accident, then obsession built on vengeance stands atop sand. Historians will still argue, of course, but he, key witness, can now shift the narrative pebble by pebble. The crucible emits 3 soft plops, metal-spitting dross. He wakes from shock, rustles for skimming spoon. Each plop sizzles in contact. With air, he catches them neatly. The alloy's hue lightens, edges flushing faint straw yellow. Heart bangs drums, pale sunrise in real time. He nearly calls aloud to share the moment with whom? The shadows, Fulgonus, ghost. Perhaps that's enough. He eases lid back, lets mixture rest. Muscles tremble, but not from exhaustion. Anticipation courses hot. Yet, amid excitement, a strange calm spread. If gold arrives, it will carry no stain of rivalry now, only dedication. If gold fails, at least truth has smelted rancor from memory. Joke number 4 surfaces spontaneously. Someone tell Adelmo. The murder mystery may close without him. Refunds at the door. He grins. The furnace responds with a reassuring roar, as if laughing along. He inhales oak smoke mingled with pepper orris scent. Together they smell like old libraries brimming with possibility. He scribbles final notes of the hour. Observation rivals shadow, recast as cautionary reflection. Alloy brightening, focus steady. On impulse, he fetches a fresh page, titles it Letter to Adelma Draft. He writes, "There is light in the furnace tonight. Whether it gilds or glows, I choose to believe our master's last lesson." Was that ambition untempered by humility? Burns teacher and student alike. If you still seek gold, know I wish you better guardrails than we shared. Farewell. He seals draft within cipher. Book may be sent, may be kept. But the act feels like opening a flue to let old poison vent. The crucible rests, color shifting toward a whispery honey tone. He sets the hourglass for a brief pause, then folds hands before the glow. For the first time, he does not chase questions about Adelmo's guilt. He lets possibilities coexist inside the furnace of the mind. Multiple truths can anneal at once. The strongest survive. Cooling dot outside. Dawn still hides below horizon, but birds murmur faint prelude. Another cycle awaits. More reagents, more hope, but something fundamental has changed. The alloy in his heart, once brittle with blame, now feels malleable. Whether gold emerges or not, he has reforged memory into something that can be worn without bleeding. He taps the crucible gently just once. Metal answers with a muted ring, like a small bell promising morning. He nods, whispers, "Thank you, master." The words drift up with steam, dissolving into plum-scented hush. The alloy hushes under its copper lid, and the alchemist, buoyed by the plum-tinted glow, allows himself a wry grin, one that belongs less to today's gray-bearded hermit and more to the eager novice who once tumbled headfirst into every rumor, promising instant transmutation. He remembers that reckless enthusiasm with fond exasperation, like recalling fashion choices involving too much ruffled lace and not enough common sense. Back then, his prized possessions were not crucibles or balances but dog-eared manuscripts filled with bombastic claims. One treatise, The Emerald Griffin's Whisper, boasted that gold could be summoned if an apprentice stood barefoot on a live toad while reciting psalms backward. He tried it behind the dormitory garden. The toad hopped off mid-verse, leaving him to recite alone, which mostly summoned laughter from a passing groundskeeper. Joke number 1 tonight. At least the toad found greener investments. He fetches that very booklet from a dusty shelf now. Its green ink has faded to swamp muck, but marginal notes from his youth survive. Optimistic exclamation marks and doodles of coins sprouting wings. Leafing through, he pauses at an illustration of a crowned fool juggling suns. It once felt profound. Tonight, it resembles a tavern sign advertising cheap cider. Historians still argue whether such texts were elaborate parables or downright hoaxes peddled to gullible students with more dreams than dragons in their pockets. Setting the booklet aside, he rummages for another relic, a scroll titled The Lunar Bride's Dowry. Its recipe called for moonbeams, condensed in hollow reeds. Armed with nothing but ambition and insomnia, he once crept onto the college roof, waving bamboo tubes at the full moon like a deranged flautist. The night watch hauled him down. He lost 2 weeks' allowance and, more painfully, his dignity. Quirky tidbit. A 13th century Welsh alchemist actually patented moon bottling devices, claiming royalties from anyone caught moon-gazing with jars. Records suggest he collected exactly 1 turnip. A quiet bubble pops beneath the crucible lid, dragging him back to present purpose. He jots observations, then lets mind wander to Master Fulginius's personal library shelves lined with volumes that deliberately contradicted one another. Fulginius argued that the contradictions were lessons in skepticism, forcing students to weigh evidence instead of swallowing promises whole. Joke number 2. Apparently, critical thinking is the philosopher's anticidrales, gullibility, indigestion. He recalls evenings hunched over a candle, cross-referencing diagrams of 7-headed dragons with tables listing real metallurgical temperatures. The disconnect was obvious, yet part of him wanted to believe dragons regulated kill heat with fiery burps. Desire, he reflects, is the most persuasive ink. Tonight, desire remains yet tempered by practice. When the crucible hisses, he no longer imagines mythical reptiles. He checks airflow and thermometer. A mainstream fact surfaces to ground nostalgia by the late 17th century. Luminaries like Robert Boyle openly debunked gold-making cheats, demanding repeatable experiments under public scrutiny. Those calls for transparency seeded modern chemistry. He scribbles Boyle's name in the margin, a nod to intellectual evolution and to the foolhardy courage required to admit being fooled. Turning pages, he stumbles on an old cipher he devised with Adelmo, a playful code swapping every vowel with the alchemical symbol for its planetary metal. He deciphers one dated note, "We are close. Hide the silver root." The phrase once thrilled him. Now it reads like children plotting to steal extra dessert. He laughs softly. Joke number 3. Grand. Conspiracies brought to you by 2 teenagers and a half-melted candle. Still, those childish projects fed skills he wields tonight. Copying scroll after scroll, honed his penmanship. Dissecting nonsense taught him to test, verify, doubt. He realizes, with gentle surprise, that gullibility was not merely was a first furnace that smelted raw curiosity into disciplined inquiry. Even a fool's stone can become foundation. He closes the booklet, returns it to the shelf with a ceremonial pat, and lifts the crucible lid. Vapors part to reveal metal, shimmering, a pale hay gold across surface eddies. Not true gold, yet lighter than lead's usual gloom. He measures density with a slender dip needle. Specific gravity has dropped a hair. A tremor of excitement flickers, but he smiles this time with measured grace. Whether fools or philosopher kings, all must respect incremental change. He adds the final grains of the obsession blend, stirs clockwise once, counterclockwise twice. Muscle memory from those moonbeam-chasing days-end whispers, almost playfully, here's to youthful nonsense, giving seasoned wisdom something to refine. The alloy answers with a soft, satisfied purl. Notebook open, he writes, youthful folly reviewed, value recognized. Current alloy brightening, progress modest but authentic. Underneath, a last reflection. Perhaps every philosopher's stone begins as a fool's pebble. He lowers the lid, resets the hourglass, and leans back, feeling a loamy comfort. The night is still deep, but he is lighter, anchored not by regrets or rivalries, but by an amused tenderness for the boy who once believed toads, reeds, and dragon farts held golden secrets. In their own crooked way, perhaps they did. A faint glow creeps beneath the shutters, not yet dawn, merely moonlight making its last theatrical bow. In the workshop's half-light, the alchemist draws a shaky breath and lets his gaze settle on the crucible's shimmering surface, pale straw gold. Now, remarkable, yet still shy of glory. The sight carries him, unwilling passenger, to a night decades earlier when perfection seemed within reach, and then blazed itself into legend. He was young, brilliant in the way candle flames, era brilliant, dazzling, but dangerously thin. A patron of dubious reputation had provided an abandoned mill on the riverbank for clandestine trials. There, surrounded by rattling gear wheels and the smell of wet grain, the alchemist and two assistants worked feverishly. For weeks, every ratio, every prayer, every planetary alignment felt blessed. Then, one breathless evening, the furnace revealed a bloom of unmistakable, burnished yellow. Not straw-tinted, not hopeful, bronze true gold, liquid and lambent. Swirling like captured sunset, they whooped. Someone may have attempted a victory jig that endangered the cooling tray. Joke number 1. Nothing says peer-reviewed success like interpretive dance in a dusty mill. Yet elation lasted fewer heartbeats than it takes Widow Brahm to sniff a rumor. A sudden draft, perhaps the river wind, perhaps spirits, demanding their price, flared the furnace. Flames leaped, licking spilled spirits from a knocked-over flask. In seconds, the wooden framing caught. The mill's dry timbers, seasoned by years of grain dust, ignited with a roar that felt biblical. The assistants fled. The alchemist, entranced, tried to salvage the crucible. He remembers the color liquid sun splashing across the stones as he stumbled. Then heat chased all thought from his skull. Smoke clogged every prayer in his throat. He escaped moments before the roof collapsed, clutching only a scorched notebook whose pages fused into charcoal lace. By dawn, the mill lay in a smoldering heap of the miraculous gold. Nothing remained but rumors that grew wilder with each retelling. Scholars still argue whether that night produced genuine transmutation or merely a spectacular optical illusion amplified by panic and torchlight. Some claim contaminants in the crucible produced a transient bronze-gold alloy. Others swear local fishermen found flecks of aurum in river mud for months, proof that molten treasure sluiced off the stones. The alchemist himself has replayed the scene so often that certainty eroded like ash in rain. He sets a hand on tonight's furnace, feeling tame, contained heat. Won't let you run off screaming, he murmurs. The fire crackles, sounding suspiciously like a skeptical cough. He adds a pinch of charcoal, adjusts, baffles theatrical smoke, is so last century. Sitting, he revisits the chaos in sharper detail. The assistants, clever Lysa, whose eyebrows nearly crisped off, and nervous Potter, still clutching the ledger as they fled. Potter insisted on jotting notes, even as sparks chased them outside. That ledger, half singed, later became the foundation of gossip tabloids in 3 counties. Mainstream fact: early modern pamphleteers thrived on tales of forbidden science, selling more copies than sermons some weeks. The Golden Inferno edition remains a collector's curiosity, right up there with woodcuts of comets gobbling bishops. The alchemist's shoulder twinges old burn scar, tightening at memory. He blows across steaming cup of chicory coffee, remains exotic import, then sips. Bitter warmth anchors him. At the mill fire's aftermath, he learned 2 lessons. 1. Success without caution breeds ruins. 2. Gossip travels faster than flame, and is twice as hard to extinguish. He flips open tonight's notebook to a fresh page, heading it "The Night Gold Burned, Dexercise in Accountability." Pen scratches: had transmutation succeeded, or pride misread color? He sketches the mill layout: furnace corner, spirit lamp table, open grain chute that likely fed the blaze, underline, then writes, replicate conditions, immediately. Crosses it out: madness lies that way. Instead, extract principles. 1 gold hue does not equal gold. Measure density before celebration. To fireproof surroundings. Ambition merits fire breaks. 3 assistants need evacuation rehearsal, not dance. Lessons. Joke number 2. Also, invest in a bucket brigade that doesn't double as choir practice. He rubs eyes. Moonlight shifts. The crucible waits. Time for the delicate temper. Draw phase a gentle cooling to encourage crystalline reordering. He removes the lid. He slides the crucible off direct flame onto a brick riser, counting breaths to maintain steady descent in temperature. Too fast, and the alloy may fracture as brutally as that long-ago roof beam. As he watches color subtly deepen, he finds courage to confront another blaze-kissed memory: the patron, a silk-cloaked count who financed the mill experiment mainly to settle gambling debts with mythical bullion. When news of the fire arrived, the count publicly dismissed the alchemist as fraud, thus sidestepping creditor reprisal. Privately, he confiscated what little debris he could salvage, hoping for residual gold. None materialized, irony quicker than bank bailiffs did. The count's reputation burned slower, but just as thoroughly. Quirky tidbit: that same count later attempted to recoup losses by selling dragon-proof undergarments made of asbestos fibers. They protected little except his ego. Critics said wearing them felt like hugging a chalkboard. Joke number 3 practically writes itself, but the alchemist saves it for later focus. Focus. The crucible's surface now glimmers like pale amber glass. He skims, reveals tiny nodules of darker metal unconverted lead clusters rising like guilty bubbles. He eases them out with a narrow spoon, dropping them onto copper plate. Each ping is a reminder, no perfection without patience. A breeze rattles shutter slats, echo of mill window shattering. He straightens, breath caught, then recognizes the sound. Mere night settling. He exhales. The mind, it seems, stocks an extensive folly library for trauma revival. He decides to test a droplet. Using tongs, he lifts a bead onto a steel anvil and taps gently. The metal flattens without cracking, malleable, promising. Color remains warm brass, not yet gold, but density feels lighter. Hope stirs controlled hope, donned in asbestos undergarments of pragmatism. Notebook again, bead number 23, ductile. Color L72A4B asterisk 22, approx. Note, approaching Aurum zone. He chuckles. Joke number 4. My younger self didn't know color metrics. He used the sophisticated chart of shiny versus very shiny. He glances at the scar on his forearm. Gift from splintered millbeam. Runs thumb along raised line. That night's blaze once symbolized catastrophic failure. Tonight, it stands as proof he survived, endured, continued. Maybe gold's greatest trick isn't monetary at all, but forging resilience. Scholars still argue whether resilience qualifies as alchemical transformation of the psyche. Some psychological historians trace post-traumatic growth to hermetic. Ideas of calcination and coagulation burn away the dross to leave essential self. The alchemist smiles. He's living. Footnote evidence. He remembers returning to the ruin next dawn. Soot-painted horizon gray, ash drifted like macabre snow. In the rubble he found a single fused clump, crucible shards hugged around a dark lump of metal. It wasn't gold, but when sliced, it displayed mesmerizing radial crystals, a rare eutectic pattern. He kept it as talisman. It sits now on shelf above his ledger. He retrieves its heavy, sharp edges, worn smooth by years of absent-minded thumb-rubbing. In lamplight, crystals still sparkle. He sets it beside tonight's bead, two siblings separated by time and flame. Comparison thrills him. Tonight's bead glows warmer, hue trending toward that elusive spectral line Fulganus, dubbed pale sunrise. He notes resemblance, then whispers to the bead, "Don't run for the door like your cousin." Joke number 5. Crucible humor never cools. Fatigue prowls, but discipline reins it back. He lowers crucible to second riser, begins gentle anneal. Heat diffuses, metal relaxes. He mirrors the process, shoulders drop, breath lengthens. In quiet, he rehearses an inner script for historians yet unborn. If this experiment succeeds, he will publish the full protocol, no codes, no ciphers, dedicating it to knowledge wrested from failure's furnace. Another mainstream sect in 1669, Hennig Brand sought gold, boiled urine, and instead isolated phosphorus. Sometimes discovery means finding what you didn't seek. Perhaps tonight he will discover not bullion, but a blueprint for safer metallurgy, or a treatise on learning from embers. Either could serve humanity better than coin. Bead cooling, he sands a window into its surface, checks reflectivity. It reflects his eye clear enough to show crow's feet, but also a gleam of undimmed curiosity. That, he acknowledges, is gold already minted. He documents, stamps, time, then tidies tools. The crucible will rest until final quench next cycle. He strokes the fused mill relic once more, then positions it as paperweight atop the fresh notes. Symbolic closure, the past anchoring the present, yet no longer overshadowing it. Moonlight dwindles. Faint paling in shutters hints at dawn staging its entrance. He smiles at the crucible, at scars, at lessons written in smoke. The night gold burned taught him fire consumes illusions first. Tonight he reforged what remained into steadier. Light no roaring blaze, just a steady candle willing to see the sunrise. The alchemist steps through the cottage door into a morning washed, clean by night rain. His boots meet damp earth, each imprint filling with reflected sky. He carries 3 linen-wrapped objects, the amber disc, a letter to Mara, and the fused relic from the burned mill. Swallows wheel overhead, threading blue to rooftops. He walks the lane toward the village square. Each stride feels measured, pulse keeping time with the land. At the smithy, Tom works the bellows. The alchemist pauses at the threshold, watching his brother guide iron to anvil. When Tom looks up, they share a nod that folds years of silence. Into recognition, he unwraps the relic first, setting it on the bench. Tom studies its crystalline face. The amber disc follows, its muted glow mirrored in both sets of eyes. The alchemist speaks of balanced ratios and leads patience. Tom answers by adding a recycled iron bar to the fire, offering shared labor when the elder is ready. Letter and disc next reach Mara's door. She stands in the lintel flower on her forearms. He places the parcel in her hands. She reads, folds the page, presses it to her heart, and invites him inside for tea. They sit beside lavender pots on the sill. Light glances off the disc, resting between them. Mara asks not whether gold appeared, but how the work felt. And he realizes matters more than any assay. A church bell sounds terse. He rises, promising to return after visiting the archive. In 14th century Bologna, civic statutes required alchemists to register recipes against fraud. A tradition continued locally. Donating his plain language procedure feels right. Crossing the square, he passes the bakery. Saffron and yeast drift in the air, recalling Lysa's letters. He resolves to write tonight, enclosing a shaving from the disc. Historians still argue whether objects carry sentiment deeper than words. He chooses to trust they do. At the archive, he signs the ledger. The curator accepts his pages, noting that Egyptian papyri describe similar chrysocolla ratios in temple. Pigments, he feels lineage lengthen behind and ahead. Midday fills the streets. Returning home, empty hands swing loose, yet he feels no lack. Village sounds carts, sparrows, children enter, him unhurried, as though the night's furnace still breathes through every breeze. On a stone bridge, he watches water glide beneath. Sunlight scatters small amber reflections across ripples. A filigree of crystallized lead rests between 2 stones. He leaves it for the river to polish. The cottage door stands open. Inside, the workshop greets him with quiet. Instruments await cleaning. The crucible's interior has cooled to dark glass. He sets water to warm, No urgency presses. Work now moves at the pace of breath. Late swallows circle the sky. He understands the experiment has not ended, but unfolded into living hours. Each decision, another gentle transmutation. Lead, gold, regret, and peace share one continuous arca ratio, perfected not in metal, but in motion. The night's long labor now dissolves into the hush of early afternoon, and with it, the alchemist lets each breath lengthen, soften, drift. No more clatter of tongs, no flare of furnace, only the quiet rhythm of a kettle steaming on low flame and the muted rustle of lavender at the open window. The air carries a fragile warmth, like a quilt just turned from the sun. And with all inhalation muscles loosen, thoughts settle to the slow tide of rest. He sits by the bench where amber light still glows along the metal disc, yet even that gentle shimmer seems content to fade. His eyes follow the play of shadow across floorboards, tracing slow arcs that feel like lullabies in motion. Outside, a single dove calls, its tone low, then falls silent again, leaving spaciousness folded around the room. In that spaciousness, he senses time spilling outward, generous, unhurried, a wide river moving past green banks. Another breath in, another breath out. The pulse in his wrists steadies, echoing the faint tick of cooling metal with each blink. Lids grow heavier, as though gravity itself has softened to cradle rather than pull. He releases one lingering thought at a time, formulae, ratios. Yesterday's storms, watching them drift like petals on still water, leaving clear surface beneath. Through half-closed eyes, he sees the last curl of steam rise from the kettle, then fade. He feels the chair ease under his weight, wood and bone settling together. In this calm, he recognizes the true completion of his experiment, not spectacle, but a slow distillation of rest, resolve, and quiet joy. Around him, afternoon light deepens to amber, wrapping every object in a soft hush. Breathing, he allows that hush to gather, to thicken, until even the thought of movement seems unnecessary, and the room itself belongs to peace.